Hello, good morning, and today is, oops, hold on 1 second, guys. That's better. Today is the 15th of the month of Tammuz. It is the 13th of the month of July. Welcome, everybody. We are continuing in the book, The Four Worlds, and we are currently on page 24. And we are in the midst of a discussion. By the way, hello. I didn't say hello to you. Don't greet you. Who is it? What's your name? Honey? Honey?
Sister.
Are you always like Honey?
June gave me that name.
What is your Hebrew
She
name?
called me Honey.
What's your Hebrew name?
What is your Hebrew name?
Hebrew name.
Yiddish
Oh, my
name.
Hebrew name is Chava.
Chava. That's the mother of all mothers. Okay, Honey. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sounds interesting. So we are in the midst of a discussion regarding the difference between the spiritual world and the physical world. The physical world, the way we have the world now, is a limited place. It is a measurable place. The whole universe is measurable. It has a certain amount, a space to it. It's where it begins in one place and it ends in another place. When we imagine spiritual worlds, we don't imagine space or time. Space is only important where space is needed, which is in the physical. The word spirit means that there is nothing physical. It's a spirit. It's spiritual. And if that's the case, why would there need to be space? There isn't. People don't occupy space, or spirits don't occupy space. They are spirits. They can come anywhere they want. They can go through any closed door or window because there is no physical obstruction that can stop a spirit. Spirits are spiritual. They don't take up any space. They're just spirits. The entities, we can't use physical terms to a spirit because it's not physical. It's a soul. You can't see the soul and you don't know where it is in your body. If you make an x-ray of the entire body, you won't find the spirit there. You won't see the spirit there because it doesn't occupy physical space. If that's the case, space is not necessary in the spiritual world. Right? That makes sense. Yet, everything in this world is an indication of what's going on in the other world. And he brought 10 different proofs of several areas around in the Talmud and in the scriptures, as well as in the Hasidic and Jewish folklore, where there are different times where you can actually see that there are different levels in the spiritual world. You have this one entered into that chamber, and that one entered into the other chamber, so there has to be a delineation of space where one is in a higher place and a lower place. So there's got to be something there, despite the fact that the space the way we know it doesn't exist. In other words, you don't have different rooms. When you say separate chambers, you're not talking about different rooms, or you have to climb up some ladders and go up to the higher world, and that just doesn't work that way. But there is a difference between places over there. There is some kind of space, and again, we can't really appreciate that because we don't know what it is. We can't even imagine anything that doesn't have space. But this world shows us that the other world has and possesses these characters where there are differences between levels and so on. So look at page 24, second paragraph. We did this last week, and we'll do it again now just to go over it. In other words, page 24, the difference between the upper and lower worlds is nothing more than the fact that the lower world is physical and corporeal, while the upper world is spiritual, pure, and clear, as will be explained. So, this world is very physical, it's tangible, you can feel it, you can touch it, you can hold on to it. Are you struggling with the page? There's no page number on yours. Do you have a page number on yours?
25.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. So we're on the third paragraph, right? So, the difference, he's established fact number one of this essay, and that is that the difference between the upper world and the lower world is not much different. The only thing is that in this world, everything has a touch to it, because there is space. And because there is space, there has to be time, and because there is time and space, you have to be able to go from one area to another area. And it takes you time to get there, even if it takes 1 second, that is time. Whereas in the other worlds, there is no physical reality. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't follow along those guidelines. It doesn't follow those rules. Okay. Now, having established that, now we can talk about the worlds in the other world, in the spiritual. What does that mean, worlds? That was his original question. How do you have worlds in a place where there doesn't seem to be any time or space? So what a world, different worlds means what? But let's see. He goes all the way from the beginning. It is written, and alamot, young women, without number. This is the Song of Songs. Song of Songs is a book in the scriptures. There are 3 sections to the written Torah. Section number 1 is the 5 books of Moses. We read that every week, every Shabbos, and we study it throughout the week. It's that week's Torah portion. 54 portions for 54 weeks, give or take. Some years have less than 54 in the Hebrew calendar. Some years can have 50 weeks, and therefore we double header certain portions. That also has to do with the festivals. If any of the festivals fall on a Shabbos, the Torah reading is not the regular Torah reading for that week, but it would be for the festival. And then you have to catch it up. So in all, you have 54 portions in 5 books of Moses, and on Simchas Torah we conclude the whole Torah, and we begin the Torah again, from anew. Those are the 5 books of Moses. After the 5 books of Moses comes the second section, which is called Nevi'im, or prophets. In that section, you have the prophets of Yehoshua, Joshua, and Shoftim, judges. That talks about the, famous names. Samson, Gideon, you might not have heard of him, and so on. Okay? It's a shortish book. It's only about 20 chapters. The next book after that will be Shmuel, Samuel. There's 1 and 2 that talks about Shmuel, King Saul, King David. King David dies right at the beginning of the next book, which is the Book of Kings. Book of Kings has David, and then Solomon builds the temple, and then there's a division between the Jewish people. The Book of Kings ends in the destruction of the first temple. So those are called the earlier books of the prophets. The later books of the prophets are Isaiah, Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, and Yecheskel. These are Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and then the smaller books. And in them is the book of Jonah, for example, where he got swallowed up by a big, a whale is not correct.
Fish.
A big fish. The word is fish, not whale.
Oh.
In the prophets, I don't know what kind of fish it is, but it had to be a pretty big one to get him in there. And he was miraculously stayed there for 3 days. We read this in the Haftarah of Yom Kippur in the afternoon, that entire book. And so on. Okay, that ends the prophets. The first parts of the prophets are more story-like, where you learn the history. The second parts are more Torah-like. Now, I'm warning you now, you got to follow this and you got to do that, and then the Jewish people did this, and there is history involved, but it's around the words they said more than around the stories that occurred. Then there's the third section of the written Torah is called Kesuvim, which means scriptures, written scriptures. That book contains no real history, except at the end of it you got the book of Esther, which is of course a history. You've got the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, Daniel, how the troubles in the exile in Babylonia, and then Ezra brought the people back to Israel. So you've got a reconstruction of the temple. The second temple finishes. Then you got the book of Chronicles, which is chronicles from Adam till the second temple. In the midst of that, they have what we call the 5 Megillas. You've heard of the Gansa Megillah, right? The Gansa Megillah is a reference to the book of Esther, which is 180 verses. It takes a long time to read, even those that read it very fast. You can't do it in less than 20 or so minutes, which is a long time. And it's a Gansa Megillah, it's a whole thing. Gans means a complete Megillah. Megillah is a scroll. There are 5 books, what we call scrolls. 2 of them we read publicly. The other 3, some communities read them, some don't. There are 2 that we read publicly, of course, the book of Esther, we all know, and then the other one is the unfortunate one, the book of Lamentations, which we read on Tisha B'Av, which is coming up in 3 weeks from tomorrow night. That is a sad book, and we sit on the floor, darken the room, and we mourn its destruction, and it's a mournful melody, and it's unusual type of Judaism. We were very optimistic, and we were up about so many things and all the tours that we've had. But one day in the year, we really get together and we just, we continue to have the tours forever, as we know. It doesn't stop. But this gives us an opportunity to mourn for all of it, and one day in the year is designated Tisha B'Av, designate all the sadness for that day. The other 3 Megillahs are the book of Kohelet. In English, they call it Ecclesiastes. I don't know if you're any more familiar with Ecclesiastes or Koheles. The book of Koheles the word Koheles means to be gathered. It's a gathering of admonishments from King Solomon. A lot of wisdom that's involved with that. He has another book called the book of Mishlei. It's not part of the Megillahs. Mishlei is parables, or proverbs, they call it. Parables, it's also Solomon. But there in the book of Mishlei, he gives a lot more. It's a lot more joyful than the one of Koheles. If you want to be smart, you want to do this, follow this in the life. So that's the book of Koheles. The book of Ruth, which is all about King David's great-great-grandmother, and how she came, and so on. And then there's the other Megillah is the book of Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs is written by King Solomon as well, and it contains 8 chapters. Every single chapter, or almost every single verse, is all about a love story, this woman that he's loving. But it has nothing to do with women. King Solomon married 1,000 women. Gulp. If he married 100, we would say, what did he do with 100 women?
Really?
Right. Everybody wanted to marry him. And he felt that by marrying them from all over the world, by marrying them would bring the world together, and it would be once and for all. It would be the temple stands, the land is ours, peace reigns, it's all good. But these women weren't quite. Their goal and motivation of marrying him wasn't to strengthen and to spread Judaism. That was his downfall. Anyway, he didn't have to write no love stories. He didn't have time to write love stories. He was using the terminology of love between man and woman and man, because that was the best way for him to describe the love of God to the Jewish people, God being the man, the Jewish people being the woman, and vice versa. And so he uses the words over there are the best love story you'll ever read. Song of Songs is just, and you're shocked. You read it and you say, what's he talking about? The Talmud relates that the sages decided that they're going to discontinue that book, and they're going to bury the copies that they had, and they're going to remove it from circulation, because everybody will make terrible mistakes and errors, and they'll just think that King Solomon was a very lustful man, and all he wanted was to give you descriptions of this woman this way and that way, her hair, her cheekbones, her breath. I mean, it just goes, her legs, her body. It just goes on and on and on and on. And you think, this guy, he's got a pretty wild imagination, but that's not what he was trying to do. He wouldn't be part of the Torah if that would be the case. And therefore, the Talmud contains a lot of verses coming from the book of Song of Songs. And Kabbalah and Hasidus has a field day, because they want to talk about God. That's the best place to go. In fact, the Talmud says that Rabbi Akiva was one of those who opposed the hiding of it, because every time he studied Shir HaShirim, the Talmud says, the book Song of Songs, he would be moved to tears, cry. Not because of the emotions that are prevalent there, the feelings are so loving to God that he just felt closer to God every time he did that, and just burst out into tears. He couldn't handle the emotions of it, the feelings. And so Hasidic teaching, Kabbalistic and Hasidic teachings there are all over that book. And they give you a very beautiful insight into what he was really saying, and why he uses this for this expression and that for that expression, and what it really means, and how we can learn from this, and how we can grow from this, and how we can take this in our service to God. So we're not talking about some imaginative poet who he put his head too far into his wife or to his girl. That's not what happened over here. He was trying to express the love that we have, that God has to the Jewish people, and vice versa. So, in that book, if you can read the lines and they'll just sound like poetry of a man to a woman, but you could also read this and take out line after line and explain it. This is what's happening over here. Let's see again. It is written and in the book of Song of Songs. It's in chapter 6 of Song of Songs. It is written, and alamot, that's the word, alamot, young women without a number. The word alamot, or elama, is a young woman. Incidentally, there is the same expression in the book of Isaiah, and that is referring to a young woman, and the Christian Bibles mistranslate that word as a virgin. That's where that comes from, the virgin. So alamot does not mean that. It doesn't mean that in Hebrew. It doesn't mean that in context of anything that is written over there. That's why I'm saying all of that stuff is easy to take care of. Anyway, so for alamot in the book of Song of Songs, which means young women without number. That means that this person had lots of young women, no number, no count. What would that mean in a connotation of what is he trying to say with this? What is King Solomon trying to say? Our sages have said, this is in the Zohar, do not read it as alamot, young women. Don't read that word as alamot, but as olamot, as worlds. You see the same word. It's the same letters and the same word. Alamot, olamot. Which means these spiritual worlds are without number or infinite. Infinite means it's not countable. There is no number. For the finite is confined to a number, whereas the infinite is beyond number. Okay, now what is he doing over here exactly? Let's go back for a second. Let's see what he's done with that word. Don't read it this way, but read it that way. Aren't you like the Christians who are reading things into something? So let's talk about this. There are words in the Torah and in the holy books, all 3 sections of the Torah, that are written. Either the word seems to be out of place, the word itself seems to be misusing it, or using a different word they haven't used until now, or the word itself is missing a letter, or has a letter added to it. And there's no such thing as a typo. Nothing in the Torah, every single letter that we have in tradition that's passed down and hasn't changed. You can check a Torah from today to a Torah from 3,000 years ago. There would be no difference. Every single letter is intact the way it is. If the letter is missing, the entire Torah would be considered unfit. As a Torah reader all my life, I've had to close up Torahs that I've been in the middle of reading them and put them back and take out another one because of a problem, a miss or a typo, a real typo. There cannot be a typo in the Torah. So all Torahs are the same. They have to contain there are 304,800 or so letters. That's hundreds of thousands, more than a quarter of a million letters in the Torah scroll. So, and every single one of them is necessary to be in there, to be visible, legible, and to have not to be connected to another letter. If there's not a space between each letter, the entire Torah will become unfit. You have to repair it, fix it. So when the Torah is missing a letter, or when the Torah has a letter added, or when the Torah has an added word to it, or a word that is unusual, the Talmud is jumping all over that. And it'll show you why. And it's not just somebody decides this. Oh, I think the extra letter means this. Comes along another sage and says, oh yeah? And where did you get that from? And if you're going to say this, what about that verse? And what about this? That's the Talmud. It's a discussion, a debate about these type of things. And until that issue is resolved, there is no resolution. If they can't resolve it, they say, we haven't resolved it. And that stays and remains an issue, a problem. We don't know what to do. And we have to wait till Elijah comes, is the words that they use. We'll wait till Elijah comes and we'll figure it out. The truth. In other words, there's nothing in the Torah that is left there and just taken for granted that it's like that. And there is nothing in the Talmud that is just stated there without a discussion about it, if it warrants a discussion. Some things are quite obvious. In other words, take this another step. Sukkot is a very good example. The holiday of Sukkot is a very good example of that. And I'm not going to get into this. It's very technical, and I need a blackboard here or something, a smartboard to demonstrate this. But in the Torah, you find the word Sukkos, which is the plural of Sukkot. You find Sukkah and you find Sukkots. Sukkos. You find that 4 times. 2 times they have an extra vav in it, and not an extra, the expected vav in it. Sukkos, os with the vav, and 2 times you find it without the vav. And that's where the Talmud jumps all over. You have to say something here, because 2 of them are with and 2 of them without. It's very obvious that there's a message being sent over here. And again, not to get into the technical side of it, I'll just share it with you, that from here we learn that the sukkah requires 3 walls. In other words, you don't have to have 4 walls to it. You can have only 3 walls. And that the 3rd wall does not have to be a complete wall either. It could be less than a complete. So in other words, like 2.5 walls. And furthermore, that we also need a roof. The word schach, which is the covering, the word schach means to cover, the covering of the sukkah, that word does not appear in the entire Torah. It's learned from the missing vav. I can't get into this now. It's a fascinating class, and to show you how to learn, to demonstrate, to show how the Torah has these things is fascinating, because it shows that nothing is, there's no typos, nothing is missing, everything is there. Now, the sages who talked about this, who debated this in Babylonia, less than 2,000 years ago, it was 1,500 years after the mitzvah was given to them. The Jewish people have been dwelling in sukkahs exactly the way they had it. They knew about 2.5 walls, the 3rd wall being smaller. They knew about the schach, but they wanted to see how it is from the Torah, not just from tradition. Where did God put this in the Torah? How do we know this? I get it, it's from tradition, but is it in the Torah? And they have it in the Torah. So now we know that there are 4 walls to this thing, 3 walls to this thing. You want to have 4 walls, go have 4 walls. We have 4 walls in our sukkah. 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th wall is the garage, the wall of the house. You don't have to have it. I know plenty of people who have, just like this. So, the fact that a word may be missing a letter, or maybe added a letter, is not just there. It's there to teach you something. Furthermore, the fact that a certain word is used in different contexts is also there to demonstrate something, to teach you something. And it's in the Talmud or in the Kabbalah, which is also Talmudic sages. The Zohar was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a Talmudic sage. It's filled with statements of Talmudic sages. So what he's saying over here is you have a word who King Solomon is talking about many maidens and young women that this person had without number. He had women without number. That's obviously an exaggeration. And King Solomon wasn't talking about all the women that he had. He made thousands, a lot of women, but that's not without a number. So what was he saying with this word and maiden? So if you look into the word, it's pretty obvious that the alamot is the exact same word as olamot. worlds. Olam and Alam, it's the same word. And so, when King Solomon was describing the greatness of God, he wasn't saying that God has many women. God has many women, God has many men. What he was saying was God has many olamot. Olamot means worlds. And to those worlds, ein mispar, there is no number. It's an infinite amount of worlds. That's what King Solomon is saying. So he takes the verse, they're taking a verse that's in the scriptures that seem to be describing some kind of love story, and instead he's showing us how these words really indicate something much more godly, spiritual than women. It's telling you about worlds that God has. Okay? All right. Now, although the worlds are without limit and number, that means they're infinite, as we know, infinite and without number, they have been divided into two categories. When you say infinite, there's no division. Infinity means no end. So you can divide as much as you want, but there's no end to this. And what are you dividing exactly? And you can take 1,000 and divide it by 2, and you got 500. But you can't take infinity and divide it to anything. It's infinite. There's no end. So, although the worlds are without limit and number, they have been divided into two categories: the revealed worlds and hidden worlds that are not revealed. They are also divided into 4 distinct categories, named Atzilut, Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. In the introduction to this book, which we did study, which took us weeks to go through, just a few pages, we spoke at length of these 4 categories of worlds. The purpose of these worlds are to eventually bring godliness, which is from the most intense, infinite source, to create a world which has all finite things to it. You know, when you look out there, it's just finite. It's just finite. Then the world of Atzilut, the first world that he talks about, this world of Atzilut is called the world of emanation. That's the closest one to God. It's a godly world. A world that's filled with godliness. There's infinity going on over there. The world of Beriah is the world of creation. There's more substance to it. And now there's something substantive. It's still spiritual, but it's more tangible, less intense. And then you have the world of Yetzirah, formation. The world of formation. I'm not going through this yet. I'm just talking outside. The world of formation is where you have something now in form, not just in matter. You've formed into something. The fourth world is the world of Asiya, the world of action. For example, you want to build a table. So the first thing you have is an idea, is a plan. That's intangible. That's in your head. That's the world of emanation. It's very godly. But there's a plan now. The next world is you went to Home Depot and you bought the wood. So now you have matter in your hand. The next world is the book of formation, where you have now taken the pieces of wood and you've shaped them into the shapes that you want them to be in order for you to create the table. So you got to have legs looking this way, and the top looks that way, and you got to have a skirt going over here. So you formed the wood into the shape that you want it to be. Now you don't just have matter, but you have matter that's ready to be assembled, and the assembly of it is the action. So you have the idea, you have the matter, you have the form of the matter, and then you have the action, the putting together of the form to create the table. That's how God worked in the worlds. The world of emanation, the world of creation, the world of formation, and the world of action. So we do have categories of worlds, each one of them another step to make the godly energy less godly, less spiritual, and more physical, until you have this universe, which is a physical universe. Okay, so now he's going to talk about the first world, the world of Atzilut. And this he's going to spend quite some time on this. The first of the four worlds is called Atzilut, or Atzilus. The world of Atzilus is the world of, it's removed. And you want to say a person is smoking something. You say, this guy's head is an Atzilus. He's not down to earth. These are the people who can't find anything. They park their car and they say, okay, my car's going to be parked in front of the door. And they come out of a different door and they are completely lost in their
Space cadet.
space. There you go, in the world of Atzilus. You have people who have, you have people who just don't have the ability, unless they write something or make an account of something, take some kind of action to remind themselves. They can just get completely lost. They can walk in the street and they can come to a spot and now, why did I come here? And unless you wrote it down, you're not going to know why you came here.
The same as saying getting old.
Getting
That's
old?
what happens when we get
Is that
older.
is that what
Right? We either have to give ourselves,
I know.
you're not in that category.
You're not old, Judy.
I'm 60. No, it's a matter of whether you're president and being mindful. When you're not yet, it's even getting older, if you're mindful more of what you're doing and pay attention, you don't forget.
So, forgetfulness, and there are people who are in their 20s who will, who need a manager and a secretary. Those are people whose head is in Atzilus, we say. Atzilus is a removed. It's an indication of someone who is out there. It's basically that. So, if that's the case, then what exactly how can you call it a world? A world means there's a beginning and an end. There's no infinity in a world. A world means that it has a structure to it, and there is here and there. It has a measurement to it. If the world of emanation is so godly, then how is it a world? How do you call it a world? So, we're going to talk about the Merkava. Merkava is the translation of the word Merkava in Hebrew is chariot. Now, let's go back a little bit. We're going to focus on footnote number 17. There was a man by the name of Yecheskel. In English, we call him Ezekiel. He was a prophet, and he has a book called Ezekiel, Yecheskel. And in the book, there is, it's very, very unique. It's very, very different. He shares with everyone his vision of heaven. He begins his book that way. He says he was on a riverbed, and the vision and the skies opened up. This is the Haftorah of the first day of Shavuos, the day that we read the Ten Commandments. So we went through that very, very fast this year for those who were here, because everybody wanted to eat the ice cream and the cheesecakes. But this is something that is bizarre, to say the least. He gives you, and this is chapter 1 of the book. After that, he gets a little bit more down to earth, and then he gets back onto heaven as he's finishing his book. He's showing us a glimpse into heaven. And what happens is, these heavens open up, it's revealed to him, and he says the words, the heavens opened up, and I saw the whatever I was able to see of godliness. And he describes winged creatures, and had hands like this, and head like that, and had many heads, and many feet, and hands. And the whole thing is obviously bizarre. It's a fantasy to most people, because he's using human terms for spiritual things. And what are wings for? Why would any creature in heaven need a wing? you always imagine an angel with those big wings behind, right?
Right.
Why does an angel need wings? So you're going to say, well, to fly. But an angel doesn't fly per se. It doesn't fly like a bird. He is in one place, and the next minute he's in another place. And not even next minute. He can be the same. There's no time constraints there. We're talking about the spiritual, the spirit. So what was he seeing here? And why is he sharing that with us? And as you can imagine, Kabbalah has a field day with this stuff. You're talking about the sights of God, well then there must be a lot of messages over here. So for a little bit of an overview of what we're about to discuss, let's look at footnote number 17. Merkava, which is the word for chariot. Ezekiel chapter 1 tells of his vision of the divine chariot and throne. He sees God's throne. God's throne? What does a throne mean? He's sitting on a chair? Is God sitting on a chair? God sitting? Like what does all this mean? I saw a storm wind coming from the north, a great cloud and a blazing fire, and from its midst I saw the image of 4 chayot, or angelic creatures, and the image of the faces of these animals, of creatures, was a man, a lion on its right, and an ox on the left, and an eagle. So you have a human, and on the right was a lion, on the left was an ox, and on the other side, opposite the man, was an eagle. Think about this now. You got the king of the wild, that's the lion. You got the king of the beasts, that's the ox, and you got the king of the birds, that is the eagle. So he sees these visions, and he's writing. This is part of the Torah. He's writing this down, Sheto, and you can read it yourself. It's very accessible. The book of Ezekiel, first chapter. And the complexion of the chayot, these angelic creatures, what was the complexion? Was like fiery coals. So they weren't just creatures, they were fire. Okay? The chayot ran and returned as a flash of lightning. So when he saw these visions, he wasn't just seeing them sitting and eating, or sleeping, or resting. He saw them coming and going in a flash. He keeps on seeing this movement back and forth. And that's what he's telling us. Is that he was not being taken to a zoo. So the fact that the lion and the ox and the eagle and all of them were jumping up and down, and the man, and they all had burning coals and all of that, and they were jumping back and forth, is all part of the situation up there. I saw one Ophan, an angelic being. Ophan means, in Hebrew, it means a wheel. I saw a wheel-like creature, an Ophan, an angelic creature in the shape of a wheel. You're looking at me askance over there, but angelic creature in the shape of an eagle or of an angel, a man with wings. It was also bizarre. You're giving human forms to angels, living not in the world, not in this world. But again, this is supposed to be an indication of a glimpse of something that's going on, that we can be able to understand it. So he's giving it to you in human terms. Isaiah also sees God, but he's different. He doesn't go crazy. He sees, Ezekiel sees things jumping up and down. Isaiah sees things very calm up in heaven. And those are the words, Kadosh, 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 from Isaiah. And from Ezekiel, he doesn't have those words. You can't hear any words. You can just see emotions. You can just see movement and feeling, but he doesn't hear wisdom. In other words, Ezekiel doesn't get as far as Isaiah goes. So he sees things on the outside, on the periphery. So he sees things running around. He's got wheels. Wheels means things that turn. So he's got angelic creatures that are wheels, that constantly are turning in motion. I saw one Ophan, angelic being, on the floor of the firmament, at the side of each of the chayot, of each of those other creatures, which are the angel, the ox and the eagle and so on. I know what to point my finger, huh? I made it happen. I want to help Honey out over here. We're still on page 24 in the footnote. In the footnote. we're still in the footnote on page 24, on the bottom of the, we're just getting to the top of the second
Yeah.
column of the footnote. So I saw one Ophan, angelic being, on the floor of the firmament at the side of each of the Chayot, of each of these angelic creatures. The appearance of the Ophanim is plural for Ophan, which means wheels. So the appearance of these angels that were wheels was like chrysolite. You know what chrysolite is? Now, how do you explain chrysolite? It's like a very, no.
Well,
Chrysolite
chrysalis.
is it? Huh?
Isn't a chrysalis a butterfly?
No, crystal light.
It's a chrysalis is a very fine, like glassy type of mineral. It's a mineral, but it's very bright, very fine. You can like see through it. So I saw this like chrysalis. When the soon, hopefully they'll soon translate this into English. When the when the Chayot moved, when these angelic creatures moved, and they were moving back and forth, he says, like lightning.
Right.
The Ophanim moved beside them. That means they accompanied them. The wheel-likes accompanied the animal-like. And when the Chayot raised themselves, when they got higher, the Ophanim raised themselves. Above the firmament, which is over their heads, was the likeness of a throne. And in other words, on top of that sky, which was over them, sitting on that firmament, which was over their heads, was a throne. He sees a throne. And upon the likeness of the throne, in other words, it wasn't quite a throne, the likeness of the throne, was a likeness with the appearance of a man, as it were, upon it above. That means someone was sitting on the throne. A man-like vision was on the throne. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. That's what he was seeing, was a human side, or a human picture of how the spiritual world worked, in how a human would have imagined it. Wheels, animals, and a throne, and a human being sitting on the, and a person sitting on the throne. Okay. It is known, he continues in a footnote, that every physical creation must have a celestial source. Everything in this world has a source above. We learned this in our first book. We learned about grass. We learned that every single blade of grass has a source in heaven. We learned about chicken and the rooster, that is a reference to the angel Gabriel. And we learned about a lot of different things in this world that all have source in the upper world, without which there wouldn't be anything in this world. In other words, everything in this world is rooted in the higher world, because how did it get here? There's nothing just here. It's all connected to God, except that God chooses to do it through so many different filters until you get to a point where you can actually see grass out there. But the grass is being grown not just because it's rooted into the ground, but because in its spiritual form, there's something spiritual that says that every one of them has an angel to it. By pulling a blade of grass, pulling it out of its root, of its source, you are cutting off a spiritual source in this world. Every time you pull a leaf off a tree, for no reason, you pull it off because you want to eat it, or because you want to send flowers to your loved one or whatever, all right, then you have a purpose for it. But people who purposely,
Do it on purpose.
without doing it on purpose, they pull it off, then this is a waste. It's one of the lessons that the fifth Rebbe taught his son to be the sixth Rebbe, the father-in-law of our Rebbe. He said they were walking along and he pulled off a leaf, the son. And the father stopped this discussion, this deep discussion about mysticism and godliness, and what did you just do? He said, what do you mean? He was just using it to play with, pull up a leaf.
Right.
So he said to him, every single thing that grows in this world, everything, has a source in heaven. When you pull it off because you need to use it for something, all right, so you're using it, it's created for a purpose. But if you're just pulling it off to do that, it's questionable if that would be considered a good purpose. If you really need it, I understand, but if just to pull it off absentmindedly and not think about the source of life that it has, or in other words, a source of spirituality, that's questionable. a very powerful and potent lesson that everything here, everything in this world has a spirit to it.
How about if you trim it? You're
So then you're not
decorating your
cutting.
yard or.
No, then you're not cutting it off.
Oh, okay.
It's
It's
you're
not
you're
killing
pulling
it,
it out of
it's
its
not-
source, right?
No.
Killing something in this world, you know. So what do? When you see the spider, do you kill it? Do you take the spray and go shh and watch it die in that water? So a lot of people will say, yes, when it comes to spiders, sorry.
Put it in a cup and then take it outside.
Oh, I pick it up with my hand and throw it out the window. Now,
And now roaches, because then you have it.
you know me already. A couple of roaches have a yard site of last night. In the garage. I don't have them in the house, but I have them out there in the garage. And I took care of those big, ugly ones.
Yeah.
No, roaches, you gotta kill them. Rats and mice, the same thing, because they won't go away. And they can carry all kinds of
Disease.
trouble. They're just unpleasant. A spider is also unpleasant, but a spider eats up all the other bugs that come bother you. So you leave it just at the window here or whatever, let them do their thing. And same thing with ants and that kind of thing. The ant is not the victim. The ant is not the culprit. It's the food that you left out that's the culprit. The Talmud says it's not the mouse that's the ganav. It's the hole that's the ganav, the robber. I'll close up the hole, the mouse won't come in. So, everything in this world, everything has a spiritual source to it. Even a single blade of grass, and it's infinite. There is no number that we can come up with to count how many blades of grass there are in this world. There are on the street. Not even in the world. I mean, how many could you? How many? There's no numbers that are here for that. So everything has its spiritual source. It is known that every physical creation must have a celestial source from which it receives its life force and existence. Its very being and physical characteristics are synonymous to their spiritual source. That means they are connected and they are equal, and they are similar to their spiritual source, albeit physical. In this world, it comes out as physical. So we see chickens, and we see trees, we see grass, we see tables, and we see birds, and animals, and humans. That's what we see here. The spiritual source, though, we don't see. We just see things that live and exist in this world, but we don't see the source. We don't even see our own source. We don't see our own souls. All living creatures are derived from the spiritual angels that are found in the divine chariot. All living beings. Which means you have a human in that divine chariot, you have a beast, a big ox, which is animals, and you have a lion, which is wild beasts, and you have eagles, which are birds. Chariot, and consequently the faces of the lion and the ox in the divine chariot are the source of all physical animals and beasts. Moreover, the chayot, which have the faces of that's these angelic beings that have the faces of a lion and an ox, are the aspect of gevura. Gevura is the Hebrew word for strength or might or discipline. As you can see, the ox and the lion are very strong, mighty, powerful beasts. You don't get in their way, and the idiots who run around in Spain on these with these bulls and with sugar. You rile up the ox, and the ox is just trying to get out and get away, and the 2,000-pound beast is coming at you with horns. Ridiculous. So those are gevura, strength, power, might. As it is written in Ezekiel 1, chapter 1, verse 13, burning like the appearance of torches, and the angels, so that means burning, they're fire, might, power, emotion. And the angels known as seraphim, the word seraphim means to be burnt, like a fire, burning like a fire, derive their name from coals of fire. Thus, physical animals that evolved from these angels, we have evolving things. The evolution from the spiritual to the physical. It's an evolution that we believe in. So physical animals that evolve from these angels are strong and powerful, and their flesh is red, the color of anger or severity. Flesh, well, the inside of a cow, a bull is red, we know that, red meat. The inside of a lion is going to be red. Even the outside of the lion is half red. And the eagle also has dark meat. Have you ever seen the inside of an eagle? Dead eagle? Kill an eagle in this country and you're in trouble. But they are not white meat. There are certain animals that are lighter meat. Eagle is a dark meat. Look it up. YouTube it. 24 hours.
Did they use the
I don't know.
Okay. The two souls of every Jew. We continue on in the footnote. The two souls of every Jew, godly soul and animal soul, are also rooted in the chariot. Let's talk about this for a second. The godly soul and the animal soul. The human being, every human being, has the physical side to the person. And I don't just mean the physical flesh, the hands and their body and the legs and the head and so on. I don't mean just the physical side. We have certain characteristics that are innate. We are born with them. So we can be optimistic and hopeful type of believing type of people. And we can be pessimistic people. Some people are just born that way. There are some people who are extremely organized and don't forget things, and if they do, you whoa, this person forget, whoa, every single I is dotted and every single T is crossed. And then there are people who cannot dot a single I and cannot cross a single T. They don't know what they're doing, and they just drift through life, and somehow they make it through. Day by day just comes and goes, and there's no schedule and there's no set thing, and they don't get things done. And that's just a characteristic. We can get annoyed at such people because, and especially if we're relying on them. But the truth is, they have to fight for every inch they can get. And these are type of people that it's a struggle for every little thing. So we have to be thankful for what they do. And screaming at them and losing their patience with them doesn't make them better. It doesn't change them. They feel embarrassed and ashamed, and they don't know how to get there. They just don't know how to do it.
But their strength usually is in other areas.
So I'm about to say that. So Maritza was born with the ability. No. Maritza knows me very well. She's been in many classes of mine. She's heard where this is going. She knows about cockroaches. I mean, my field. And so on. Such people, though, can be amazing thinkers. The nutty professor, the mad scientist. These are people that are scientists and professors that teach brilliant things, and they can't be brilliant in their own lives. They can't get it down to earth. So when they go home, they don't even know what pair of pants to wear tomorrow. They may walk into class without a pair of pants. Not because they want to, just because they're just absent-minded type of people. They're thinking, and they're busy thinking. Stop bothering them while they're thinking. These are people that are born that way. Then there are people who are just so kind, over-kind, that they can't control themselves. They don't know how to put the spike in the wheel and say, just stop, would you please focus on what you need to focus. They just want to help out other people, and then they go away from home. Then there are people who are cruel and don't care about other people and don't worry about other people suffering and seeing other people's plight, and you can help them out. Who needs to help these people out? Everyone is born with different types of characteristics. We are born with innate characteristics. So are animals. You have certain animals that would be more aggressive than other animals. There are the passive ones and there are the aggressive ones. You see that in the groups of cows and sheep. You see that in monkeys. You see it in different animals. that there are some who are dominant ones, we know that. But I'm not just talking about dominant, I'm talking about some who are just simply back, they're just passive and they just don't. Same thing with humans, we have certain characteristics we are born with. That is our very physical side. Even though the characteristics are intangibles, they're not part of our bodies, they're just expressions of who we are. Nevertheless, we do get involved with and we say we can't help, we justify ourselves from today till tomorrow. When somebody points out something that could be a character flaw, we either say, well, I'm never talking to you again, even though they may be 100% right, or we say, you're right. But, only when you're a kid you don't know how to protect yourself, so you think you're the worst person in the world because your mother just told you how terrible it was for what you did or what you thought or how you did, whatever. But when you get older, we justify everything. We are able to very well live with ourselves. Yeah, listen, okay, I couldn't. I was weak. I didn't know how to do it. And we move on. We live with ourselves very well. Other people who have maybe the same flaw that bothers us more than anything else, what annoys us more than anything else is watching someone else do the same thing we didn't do. How do you not do that? That's what the Baal Shem Tov once said, that the person that annoys you the most is the person who's actually the mirror. You're looking at yourself. And the reason why you're seeing it, and the reason why you're seeing that is not so you should see the flaw in the other person. It's so you should look at yourself and say, what happened there? There was a story of the second Rebbe of Chabad, the son of the founder of the Chabad movement. And he came to a town, and people came in to see him, as they always would, one-on-one. And a guy walks into him, and the Rebbe said, the guy walks into him, and he says, Rebbe, I did something terrible. And he tells the Rebbe, confesses to the Rebbe that he's a necrophilia, necromaniac, that he has to be with dead corpses. He's,
That's an interesting way of putting it.
There are a lot of people in this world that have problems. What turns them on is weird and unusual and perverted and so on. You have your little kids, so you have whatever. So the Rebbe closed the door for people to come in, and he announced he's coming out to pray the afternoon service in a half hour. He comes out there and the Rebbe's face is swollen with tears. And he says we need to pray the Erev Yom Kippur prayers now. And do the Al-Chayt and all that. And do repentance. Everyone was crying. They thought something terrible was about to befall the Jewish people. He didn't say what it was. The next day, the Rebbe announced that the reason why he did this was because the guy came into him and told him such a shocking story that the Rebbe said, I cannot help a person if I don't find it within myself. If I don't find that flaw within myself, then how do I know how to deal with it? So I've got to find it within me. And I couldn't possibly imagine what I could have done that could resemble that. And if that's the case, then there's no way in the world that person came to me and not to send me a message to myself. So that was a gift. The fact that the sinner walked in meant that he had to see it within himself. If I couldn't see it within myself, it meant that I missed something of my time. And that's why I had to repent. And then I realized what the lesson here and how I can deal with that. And that sometimes we get our relationship with God is like a dead body. You see, he looked at it from a spiritual standpoint. God is this warm, living being. We are supposed to make this connection, this bond to him, and sometimes we are cold as a dead body. And that, how to deal with that, how to warm yourself up again, that gave me an understanding of how I could help this guy out. So he had to find it within himself, the possibility of such, not that he did something wrong, but the possibility, bringing it down to his own, in his own intelligence. There's no other way you can help people unless you know how to help them. When people come to me and they have marriage issues, or people come to me between friends and they have questions, they have issues, and problems and they want to discuss something, people on the phone, on Skype, in the city, out of the city. I have this stuff that happens all the time. I can't help them if I don't know anything about this thing. I have to sometimes I have to tell people, let's get back in 3 days so I can think about this. I'm not just going to tell them something. Well, why would that help? Why is my idea better than anyone else's idea? So unless I have this thought in my mind, and if I've gone through it, or I've seen it, or I've read about it, or I've brushed up on it, then I can be of help to someone. But I can't do. No one can really help someone else out if you can't. If you don't have some kind of wherewithal, some kind of direction here, guidance. This means that any time you see something, you are seeing a mirror, which is disturbing to you. You're actually seeing something within you. And the reason why we're seeing it is not so you should repair the world and see if you can help everybody else out. It's to repair yourself. That's what the Baal Shem Tov says. So instead of getting annoyed at the other person, get annoyed at yourself, which is not possible, of course, because we are able to live with ourselves quite well. So that is what we call the physical side of us. That's the physical life, the animal soul. It's just like an animal. And certain animals have certain characteristics, and other of the same species can have different. You can have a cat that's wild and aggressive and crazy, and you can have a cat that's passive and sweet and nice, and anybody walks in, it's got used to it. And same thing with all kinds of other things. The only ones that you can't train are like cold-blooded fish, reptiles. Those don't have emotions. They'll eat you if you can fit in their mouths. That's how reptiles work. You can't train these. You can train to do certain things, but you can't really train them. You can't train fish. You can train dolphins. You can train whales. You can't train the fish. They're all cold-blooded and they're all under the water and leave us alone. And you can't even get close to them. That's the animal side of us. We are like animals in that area, in that point. How we react, how we control ourselves, what our characteristics are. Then we have a godly soul. That's already a whole different side to us. And this is also based on one of the verses that says, I've given you souls. You have an animal soul, meaning you have a body and you have life in the body, and it's just innate. You're born with it. Then you have the godliness within us. And the godliness within a Jew is what differentiates between a Jew and a non-Jew. Because there's no physical difference. All right, we may have some noses that are a little bigger. Jewish noses are known to be a little larger. That's because the reason why we've got big noses is to put them in the 5 books of Moses. But that's just one of these Jewish folk songs. But physically, there is no difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. It's the spiritual difference. Spiritually, we have different makeup. Our souls are different. So the godly soul of a Jewish person is, as the book of Job says, a piece of God, literally. You've got a piece of God within you. That's why God calls Jewish people, he calls them his children. Why do you think they call him the son? Because we're all children of, all Jews are considered children of God. It's a robbed term, a ripped off term. The Torah says in several places, this is my son, or this is my children. He calls the Jewish people children. Coming up in 5 weeks from now, you'll see it written in the Torah. 2 weeks after that big week. That spiritual, godly soul, the peace of God within a person, enables the person to change his or her characteristics. You can have a person born very shy, and somehow they overcome that. It's an obstacle in their lives. They overcome that. You can have a person who is innately very angry, gets angry quickly, and that person works on himself. Avoda, it's a service, so work to change a person's nature. One of the most difficult things you can do, to change your nature. To somehow not say, oh, I was born that way, therefore all's good. When God says, I don't want you to get angry, when God says, I don't want you to steal, when God says, I don't want you to be shy or go out there and do whatever you need to do, God wasn't talking to people who don't get angry. or people who don't want to steal, or to people who are not shy. He was talking to people who have a flaw or a stumbling block or a problem. And he says, I know you have the problem, and I'm telling you, don't do it. How do you get over it? Well, this is part of our service. It's part of our Jewish lives, to work on ourselves, to constantly never give up, and always, we have to go through a struggle and a battle. So these two souls, the godly soul and the animal soul, are constantly at each other's throats. They're at odds. One wants to do spiritual things, and one wants to just do what they feel like doing. One of the definitions of this decade: if it feels good, just do it. Why do you have to be ashamed of how you were created? You were born this way, so just be that way, be. So this one was born with this need, and the other one was born with that feeling, and the other one was born with what pleases them. Do what you please. Then you're like an animal. Because animals do what they please. There's no intelligence over there to overcome. Why should they overcome anything? This animal wants to gore other animals, so it doesn't. It wants to do it because it wants to do it. It wants to eat in that field. Go try and stop it. That's what it wants. It's going there. And this dog wants to make by that fence, not by the other fence. Wait, do it over here. No, I want to do it here because it smells good. The earth smells good over here. You're going to stop. You're going to fight with the dog. Why would you fight? It does what it wants, what it feels like. Unless it's terrified of being slapped or whatever, however you train dogs. I don't know how you do this. Then it's just going to do what it wants. Human beings are not made that way. God asks us not to be that way. He gives us a Torah. He gives us a guide, not just to the Jewish people, but to all people. And he says, this is how I want you to behave. Because it's better for you. I gave you intelligence, so you should overcome this. But I was born, you gave me such a stumbling block, I can't handle it. If you've given that stumbling block, then you obviously can. Or else you would never be given that problem. So, these two souls, a tale of two souls that are constantly trying to conquer us. And when we give in to the animal soul, we assume an animal character to ourselves. And when we do things that are not the way we want it or feel like doing, but the proper thing to do, the right way to do, we become godly. This is for Jews and Gentiles alike. We become godlike and godly to overcome the human innate urges and feelings and wants and desires. And again, I'm not saying this, it sounds so easy. It's not easy for any individual person in this world to overcome the challenge of nature, the natural thing. For anyone. This one could have kleptomaniac, and the other one needs to lie all the time, and the other one is afraid of things too much, and this one is whatever. The list is long. It doesn't have to be like sinful. It can just be harmful stuff. And okay, I'm fearful. I'm never gonna. Remember the guy Richard Hughes? What was his name? Hughes, who died in '76. A billionaire, huh? Howie Hughes. Howie Hughes, not a Jewish guy, but he had so much money that he became more and more paranoid, and he wouldn't even eat the food that was being prepared because somebody's trying to poison him. And eventually he died with billions of dollars in his safe. What was the purpose of all that money? Where did that money? What was the use of it? You can't eat the money. You can't swim in the money. You can't do anything with it. What a waste. Here's a guy who couldn't get over it himself. It's a phobia, it's a problem, it's an issue, but if God gives it to us, He wants us to overcome it. So let's just quickly finish this and then we'll move. The two souls of every Jew, godly and animal soul, are also rooted in the chariot. However, the godly soul's source is known as Adam, man. He calls it the highest character of any physical being, which is Adam, and the highest term for human, which is Adam. The word Adam is Adameh in Hebrew, which means similar to God, God-like similarity. As God says, I created man in the image of God. As it is written in addition to Ezekiel in Genesis, and God created man in His image, right? So the Adam is the godliness within each person. The chariot exists on every level of creation. The root of a physical lion, for example, is the lion of the chariot. So, and he refers to that book that we studied previously. So, in other words, this chariot is sort of the source of godliness for the entire world that it's in. And it has the animal side, it has the godly side, it has the human side, has everything is rooted in there, and that's where we get our spiritual, spirit, soul, energy, and so on. And that does it for today, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great week.